It was meant to be the expedition of a lifetime, an untamed voyage through the heart of Central Africa, navigating the unknown white waters of the continent's vast and wild river systems. For 35-year-old South African kayaker and river guide Hendrik "Hendry" Coetzee, this journey was not just about exploration, but about pushing the limits of human endurance and courage. He had spent his life chasing the world's wildest rivers. But on December 7, 2010, that passion claimed his life. Coetzee was leading a team of American kayakers, Ben Stooksbury and Chris Korbelik, down a remote stretch of the Lukuga River, a tributary of the Congo, when tragedy struck. Without warning, a crocodile exploded from the water and snatched Coetzee from his kayak. In an instant, he vanished beneath the surface, taken by a predator lurking in the depths. His teammates, stunned and helpless, paddled frantically to shore. There was nothing they could do, no chance to recover his body, just the silence of the river and the raw terror of what they had witnessed. The team made contact with villagers who helped them reach the International Rescue Committee. From there, they were evacuated to Kalemie, a small town in the Democratic Republic of Congo, 150 kilometers from the scene. Though physically unharmed, both men were in deep shock. Hendry Coetzee was not a thrill-seeker in the typical sense. Born in Ottosdal in South Africa's northwest province and raised in Centurion, Pretoria, he had long traded comfort for purpose. His life was marked not by what he owned, but by where he went, and why. He lived simply, often with only books for company, and cared little for accolades or attention. He had run some of the world's most formidable rivers, including a solo journey down a 200-kilometer section of the Congo, and a daring descent through the Murchison Falls stretch of the Nile. In 2004, he had completed the first-ever source-to-sea expedition of the White Nile. He had been living in Uganda prior to the Great Lakes expedition, which began in October 2010. The team, which originally included Jesse Coombs and Darren McQuoid, aimed to complete the journey by Christmas. Their route circled the Great Lakes region, documenting the wild waters few had dared to touch. Just days before his death, Hendry wrote what would be his final blog post. It reflected his deep understanding of the risks he faced, but also his profound sense of purpose. Too often, when trying something no one has ever done, there are only three likely outcomes: success, quitting, or serious injury and beyond, he wrote. The difference in the three are often forces outside of your control, but this is the nature of the beast: risk. He signed off with a sentence that now echoes with haunting finality. We stood precariously on an unknown slope deep in the heart of Africa. For once my mind and heart agreed I would never live a better day. His mother, Marie Neiman, described him not just as an adventurer, but as a humble and kind soul. Wherever he went, he just sowed a bit of who he was, she said tearfully. He was just awesome. A memorial for Hendry will be held in Centurion on January 28th. Though he is gone, his legacy lives on, not just in his daring, but in the quiet humility with which he lived. As his longtime friend and sponsor, Celiers Kruger, said, Hendry was without doubt one of the greatest river explorers of our time, but more than that, he was the most humble of them all. His quest for the best day ever was relentless, and in the wild rivers of Africa he may have found it. On the night of January 18th, 2021, 23-year-old Victoria Strauss, a graduate student at Ohio State University, was leaving campus after a long evening of studying. Just weeks away from earning her master's degree in social work, she was filled with hope for the future. Victoria was known for her warmth, kindness, and deep desire to help others. Her dream was to become a therapist, a goal she had worked tirelessly toward. Around 11:30 p.m., Victoria drove into a familiar parking garage in downtown Columbus. She pulled up to the automated pay station to exit. As she reached out of her car window to insert her credit card, it slipped from her fingers and fell to the ground. In a quick attempt to retrieve it, she opened her car door and leaned out to grab the card. But in that moment, her foot accidentally pressed down on the gas pedal. The car lunged forward. The open door slammed into the heavy toll booth structure, trapping Victoria's head between the door and the post. She was pinned, unable to move or call for help. The garage was quiet, and no one was nearby to witness what had just happened. Hours passed before a security guard discovered her. At 5:40 a.m., he spotted her vehicle and immediately called emergency services. Tragically, it was too late. Victoria was pronounced dead at the scene. The police investigation concluded that the incident was a freak accident. No foul play was involved. An autopsy later revealed the cause of death as blunt force trauma to the head. The report also noted that Victoria had a blood alcohol level of 0.221-, nearly 3 times the legal limit in Ohio. While the alcohol did not cause the crash directly, it likely contributed to the chain of events that led to her death. The news of her passing devastated her family, friends, and classmates. Victoria was deeply loved by those who knew her. Her friends described her as someone who always checked on others, even when she was struggling herself. Before coming to Ohio State, she had been on Florida Atlantic University's cheer and dance team. Dance remained one of her greatest passions, and many of her friends later held tributes in her memory. Ohio State University issued a statement mourning her loss, and grief counselors were made available to support students and staff. Her professors remembered her as a dedicated student with a bright future. Victoria's death served as a heartbreaking reminder of how quickly life can change. A simple everyday action, picking up a dropped credit card, led to a tragic and irreversible outcome. But for those who knew her, she is remembered not for the accident, but for the joy, empathy, and strength she brought into the world. Though her life ended far too soon, Victoria Strauss's spirit lives on in the lives she touched and the legacy of compassion she left behind. It was supposed to be just another routine training mission, an adventurous flight over the beautiful waters east of Florida. For 14 daring young Navy airmen aboard 5 TBM Avenger torpedo bombers, December 5, 1945, was meant to sharpen their navigation skills in the post-W2 calm. Little did they know it would be the final flight they'd ever take, and one that would etch their names into one of history's most enduring mysteries. The war had ended just months earlier. Spirits were high, peace had returned, and the military was transitioning back to peacetime duties. That day, the Flight 19 crew was assigned Navigation Problem Number 1 Inch, a relatively simple exercise. Fly east over the Atlantic to a known target site near the Bahamas, drop dummy bombs on a wrecked ship, turn north over Grand Bahama, then head home to Fort Lauderdale. Easy, right? But they were flying into the Bermuda Triangle, an infamous stretch of ocean bordered by Florida, Bermuda, and Puerto Rico. This region has a notorious reputation as Earth's largest maritime graveyard. Ships and aircraft vanish here like magic tricks gone wrong, often without a trace. Pilots and captains alike have reported strange compass failures, bizarre weather shifts, and eerie optical illusions. Some even whisper about aliens, time warps, or underwater cities. Because when science can't explain something, our imagination fills the void. Flight 19 took off at 2:10 p.m. The weather, favorable. The mission on track. But by 3:45 p.m., something had gone terribly wrong. "Cannot see land," came the worried voice of Lieutenant Charles Taylor, the squadron leader and a seasoned combat pilot with 2,500 flying hours. "We seem to be off course." Then silence, then chaos. "We can't find west. Everything is wrong. We can't be sure of any direction. Everything looks strange, even the ocean." Another voice crackled over the radio. The tone turned panicked, disoriented, helpless. Then, chillingly, "It looks like we are entering white water. We're completely lost." And then, nothing. Flight 19 had vanished. Immediately, the Navy scrambled 2 massive PBM-5 Mariner seaplanes to search the last known location. One of those rescue planes carrying 13 crewmen also disappeared. A nearby ship reported seeing a fiery explosion in the sky around the same time. 6 aircraft, 27 men, all gone. No distress beacons and no wreckage, no oil slicks, just silence over the sea. Theories flooded in. Some blamed human error. Taylor, possibly mistaking the Bahamas for the Keys due to a faulty compass. Others blamed violent weather or engine failure. But none of that explains the total disappearance. Even modern searches over 250,000 square miles have yielded nothing. Not even a wingtip. This single event ignited the myth of the Bermuda Triangle, spawning books, documentaries, and conspiracy theories that stretch to this day. Flight 19's disappearance wasn't just a tragedy. It was the spark that gave the triangle its teeth. Every December 5th, a modest museum in Fort Lauderdale, once the very airbase the flight departed from, hosts a ceremony to honor the lost patrol. Veterans, families, and historians gather, clinging to memory in the face of mystery. Whatever the truth, one thing is certain. These men were brave. They trained for war, flew with honor, and vanished in pursuit of duty. Though they never returned, their story endures. Proof that even in peace, danger can hide in plain sight. They died doing what they loved, and for that, they'll never be forgotten. In the heart of Costa Rica's lush Guanacaste region, where rivers wind through thick forest and the sounds of wildlife echo through the air, a small town is grieving the loss of one of its own. Jesus Chucho Alberto Lopez Ortiz, just 29 years old, was more than a footballer. He was a brother, a son, a husband, and a local hero on the pitch for Deportivo Rio Canas, the town's beloved soccer club. On Saturday, July 30th, what began as a casual day by the water turned into something no one could have imagined. Chucho and a group of friends had gathered near the Canas River, a wide and winding body of water known for its natural beauty, and for something else, something far more dangerous. Beneath its calm surface lived crocodiles, massive territorial reptiles that have long called the area home. Despite the risks, Chucho, described by many as outgoing and fearless, climbed onto the local bridge and leapt into the river. Witnesses said the splash had barely settled when a dark shape moved through the current. A crocodile, large and fast, closing in. In seconds, the water turned red. The people on shore could only watch in horror as the creature dragged Chucho beneath the surface. A video later surfaced online, showing the crocodile swimming down the river, Chucho's body still clutched in its jaws. The footage spread quickly, too quickly. His team, still reeling from the news, pleaded with the public to respect the family's grief. "Please do not upload videos of what happened," the club wrote. "There are children, a mother, a father, brothers, and Jesus' wife who deserve respect." Local authorities were called to the scene. In order to recover Chucho's body, police were forced to shoot and kill the crocodile, according to the Costa Rican Red Cross. What followed was an outpouring of sorrow that swept across the country. On Wednesday, in the town of Santa Cruz, over 1,000 mourners filled the streets for Chucho's funeral procession. Teammates in uniform carried his photo through the crowd. Locals stood in silence as the community came together, not just in grief, but in love. "Today we said goodbye to you, Chucho," his club posted online. "You were not alone. Your family, your friends, and your country were with you." Costa Rica, a land rich with wildlife, is home to the American crocodile, a species known both for its size and unpredictability. While attacks are rare, they are never forgotten. And this one, more than most, has left a hole in a small community, one that won't soon heal. But in the memories of teammates, the echoes of stadium cheers, and the hearts of a grieving family, Jesus Lopez Ortiz, Chucho, will be remembered not for how he died, but for how he lived, as a teammate, a brother, a dreamer, and a beloved son of Costa Rica. It was December 4th, 2016, a day that was supposed to mark the beginning of a new life for 32-year-old Rosmar do Nascimento Silva. Living in Sao Paulo, Brazil, she had long dreamed of making her wedding day not only memorable, but magical. To surprise her fiancé, Uderley Damasceno, Rosmar made a bold and romantic decision. She would arrive at their wedding ceremony in a helicopter. Only a handful of people knew about the plan. She wanted her entrance to be dramatic, private, and unforgettable. The wedding was set to take place at Recanto Beija-Flor, a large scenic venue in the city of Osasco, just outside Sao Paulo. Over 300 guests had been invited, and everything was going perfectly. The sun was out, decorations were in place, and music floated through the venue. But the bride was still missing, and only 6 people knew why. At around 4 p.m., Rosmar boarded a Robinson R-44 helicopter at a nearby hangar. With her were her brother Silvano Nascimento da Silva, the couple's wedding photographer Nilda Cristina Neves, who was 6 months pregnant, and the pilot Peterson Pinheiro. The flight was meant to be brief, no more than 15 minutes. As the rotor blades spun up and the helicopter lifted off, Rosmar smiled out the window. Video footage taken inside the aircraft captured her excitement. She looked radiant, dressed in white, her dream unfolding in real time. But not long after takeoff, the skies began to darken. Weather conditions shifted rapidly. Thick fog began rolling in, followed by rain. Visibility plummeted. What had started as a clear afternoon became dangerous within minutes. Inside the helicopter, calm turned to chaos. The onboard camera recorded the atmosphere turning tense. Alarms began to beep. The once steady camera began to shake. Passengers could be heard screaming as the aircraft struggled in the worsening weather. Pilot Peterson tried to stabilize the helicopter, but it was a losing battle. Disoriented by the fog and with almost no visual cues, the helicopter drifted off course. Investigators believe it may have clipped a tree in a heavily forested area less than a mile from the wedding venue before crashing violently to the ground. The impact was catastrophic. All 4 people aboard were killed instantly. Back at the venue, the wedding guests were still unaware of the tragedy unfolding nearby. Many were simply waiting for the ceremony to begin, assuming a minor delay. Only the small group involved in the helicopter plan began to grow concerned. When a call confirmed that the helicopter had indeed departed on time, anxiety set in. Then came word of a nearby helicopter crash. At first, no one made the connection. But when details began to match, a sense of dread spread through the venue. Udurli, the groom, was standing at the altar waiting for his bride when he received the news. In just a few words, his entire world shattered. Rosemare, her brother, the photographer, and the pilot were gone. The wedding that had been so full of joy just moments earlier dissolved into grief and disbelief. Authorities launched a full investigation. It was discovered that while the helicopter was licensed and its registration valid until early 2017, it had been operating over its recommended passenger limit. It was designed for only 3 passengers, but 4 people had been on board that day. Investigators cited the combination of bad weather, poor visibility, and overloading as contributing factors to the crash. They concluded that the pilot had likely become disoriented due to the fog, causing him to lose control. 8 fire crews responded to the crash, but there was nothing anyone could do. In the days and weeks that followed, friends, family, and even strangers across Brazil mourned the lives lost. The story dominated headlines not only because of the scale of the tragedy, but because of the heartbreaking context. A bride, full of joy and love, dying just moments before she was to be married. The footage from inside the helicopter was later released as part of the investigation. It offered a haunting glimpse into those final moments, images of hope, panic, and an end that came far too soon. Rosemare's dream was never realized. What should have been the happiest day of her life became one of unimaginable sorrow. Today, the story remains one of the most tragic wedding day incidents ever recorded. For Udurli and the families of those who died, the memory of that day is etched in grief. It is a painful reminder of how fragile life is, and how even the most beautiful plans can unravel in an instant. It was supposed to be another adrenaline-fueled day for Ian Forgaze, a seasoned 54-year-old backcountry skier from Lincoln, Vermont, as he carved through the rugged, snow-draped slopes of New Hampshire's Mount Washington. Known for embracing nature's harshest playgrounds, Ian was no rookie. He had skied solo before, danced with danger on technical lines, and trusted his instincts where others wouldn't even venture. But on February 1st, 2021, his thirst for adventure would take a tragic turn. Mount Washington, the crown jewel of the White Mountains, is as breathtaking as it is brutal. Its beauty masks its danger, bone-chilling winds, unpredictable weather, and, most treacherous of all, avalanches. The Ammonoosuc Ravine, where Ian set off that fateful morning, rests on the mountain's western flank. It's lesser known than the infamous Tuckerman Ravine, but no less lethal. The snowpack there is fickle, and even when experts rate the avalanche danger as low, Mother Nature has her own rulebook. And so, with temperatures in the single digits and winds gusting at 33 miles per hour, Ian skied out alone. That day's forecast warned of small avalanches possible in isolated upper elevations, technical terms. But to Ian, it likely felt like a green light. But deep in the ravine lay a terrain trap, a natural funnel where snow, once loosened, doesn't just slide, it collapses. Tragically, that's exactly where Ian ventured. One wrong move onto a fragile pocket of wind-drifted snow triggered a slide that buried him under nearly 13 feet of compacted white. The chilling part? It didn't stop there. The avalanche was only the beginning. The snow kept falling the next day, and yet another slide buried him deeper. Ian had an avalanche transceiver, a beacon that could have led rescuers to him, and it did. But by the time search teams detected the signal on February 3rd, it was too late. It took rescuers over an hour and a half to dig him out, but Ian had already succumbed to asphyxiation. The rescue involved New Hampshire Fish and Game, the Mount Washington Avalanche Center, the Forest Service, and volunteers from the Mountain Rescue Service, a testament to the respect and concern Ian commanded. A detailed report followed, not to cast blame, but to honor the harsh truths of the mountain. Ian was not reckless. He was experienced, calculated, even prepared. But as one avalanche expert famously said, "It is good you are all experts, but the avalanche, it does not know that you are experts." What makes this case so haunting isn't just the death, it's how preventable it seemed. Ian was trained, equipped, and cautious, but he was alone, skiing over a thin snowpack above a known danger zone in a spot no skier had ever died before. He became the first, and perhaps that's the most gut-wrenching part, knowing that even with the best gear and experience, nature still writes the final chapter. In a world of GPS apps and smartwatches, there's something raw about the mountains. A reminder that the wilderness remains untamed. For thrill seekers like Ian, it's not about conquering nature, but about dancing with it. And sometimes the music stops too soon. He died doing what he loved. And though the snow took him, his story now echoes through the peaks. A solemn warning, a respected legacy, and a life remembered not just for how it ended, but for how fully it was lived. This next story takes us to the wild northern reaches of Queensland, Australia, to a remote stretch of the Annan River, just outside the quiet town of Cooktown. It was meant to be a peaceful family camping trip, a break from the everyday, a moment to reconnect under open skies. But what started as an ordinary afternoon would end in unimaginable horror. On that day, 40-year-old Dr. Dave Hogbin, a father of 3 and a respected GP from New South Wales, was walking with his wife and young sons along a bush trail that skirted the river. The air was warm, the sun high, and nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Until, without warning, the ground beneath his feet crumbled. A 5-meter drop. Just like that, the earth gave way and Dave fell into the dark waters of the crocodile-infested river. Chaos erupted. His wife, Jane, also a doctor, immediately scrambled down the collapsing bank, desperate to pull him out. In that moment, adrenaline and love took over. She grabbed his arm, holding on tight, but the ground beneath her began to slip too. She was falling, and that's when Dave made his final decision. He let go. He knew what was coming. He knew if he held on, he'd pull her down with him, down into the water where something ancient and merciless waited. Within seconds, he was gone, dragged under, taken. The crocodile, nearly 5 meters long, a modern-day dinosaur, had been waiting. One bite, one pull. That's all it took. Back on the bank, Jane screamed for help. Their 3 young sons, aged 7, 5, and just 2, had no idea their lives had changed forever. Rescue teams were dispatched immediately. Search crews combed the murky waters, helicopters flew overhead, and wildlife rangers tracked every ripple in the river. Hours passed, then days. Eventually, a crocodile was captured, and inside, they found human remains, believed to be Dave's. Formal identification was still pending, but there was little doubt. The family's grief was unimaginable. But through it, Jane found the strength to speak about what had happened. Not for attention, but so the world would understand the kind of man Dave was. A protector, a father, a hero. He didn't die fishing. He wasn't taking a foolish risk. He was walking with his family, doing everything right. And when everything went wrong, he made the ultimate sacrifice. His sister-in-law, a journalist, later wrote, "His final decisive act was to let go of Jane's arm when he realized she was falling in. That single moment saved her life." She added that his children didn't witness his final moments, a small piece of consolation in an otherwise horrific tragedy. Jane described her husband as fiercely loyal, gentle, and endlessly devoted to his kids. "He saved me," she said. "His last act was to make sure I didn't die with him." As of now, a report for the coroner is being prepared. The river remains silent. The search has ended. And yet, the warning lingers, because sometimes nature doesn't give you a second chance. And even in the quietest places, on an ordinary path with your family, the earth can betray you, and the water can take everything. Treasure your loved ones, because none of us are ever as far from the jaws of death as we like to believe. It was the evening of July 30th, 2008, just another summer day in Canada. A Greyhound bus traveling from Edmonton to Winnipeg carried a group of passengers who expected nothing more than a quiet, routine journey. Among them was 22-year-old Tim McLean, a young man who had just wrapped up a stint working at a carnival. Tired but content, Tim settled into his seat near the back of the bus, headphones on, eyes closed. It was supposed to be just another long ride home. Also on board that day was Vince Lee, a man who had boarded the bus in Erickson, Manitoba. At first, he kept to himself, sitting near the front. But partway through the journey, Lee unexpectedly moved and took the seat next to Tim. At the time, no one thought much of it, just a stranger changing seats. Tim, still listening to music, didn't stir. What happened next would stun the nation. Without warning, Lee pulled out a large knife and began to stab Tim repeatedly in the neck and chest. The bus erupted into chaos. Passengers screamed in horror as the bus driver slammed on the brakes, pulling over on the side of the road. People rushed to escape the unfolding nightmare, flooding out of the vehicle. But Lee stayed behind, with Tim. While others watched helplessly from outside, Lee continued his brutal assault. A few brave passengers tried to re-enter the bus to help, but he threatened them with the knife, keeping them at bay. Through the windows, onlookers saw images too horrific to forget. When the police finally arrived, the violence had already reached its shocking peak. Tim was dead, and what Lee had done was beyond comprehension. Witnesses described behavior so disturbing, it was hard to believe it was real. But as investigations continued, it became clear that Vince Lee was suffering from a severe mental illness. Diagnosed with untreated schizophrenia, he later claimed he had been hearing voices he believed were from God, commanding him to act. In 2009, a Manitoba court ruled that Lee was not criminally responsible due to his mental state. Instead of prison, he was committed to the Selkirk Mental Health Center for treatment. The court's decision ignited a firestorm across the country. Some argued that Lee was ill and needed compassion and care. Others were outraged that someone who had committed such a violent act wouldn't face prison time. Tim's mother, Carol Dedeli, became a powerful voice for change. Her grief was unimaginable, but what haunted her even more was the idea that the man who killed her son might one day walk free. And in time, that's exactly what happened. In 2015, Lee, now calling himself Will Baker, was granted supervised day trips outside the hospital. By 2017, he received an absolute discharge. That meant no criminal record, no restrictions, as long as he continued treatment and checked in with doctors. The ruling sparked national debate. Many, like Carol, felt betrayed by the system. She believed that people found not criminally responsible still needed long-term oversight and consequences. Baker later expressed remorse, but for many, it wasn't enough. The case raised complex questions about justice, mental illness, and public safety, questions Canada is still grappling with today. It was supposed to be the ultimate test of endurance, an adventurous solo trek to the top of the world. For David Sharp, a 34-year-old British engineer turned daredevil mountaineer, Mount Everest wasn't just a goal, it was the holy grail of human willpower. He'd climbed Kilimanjaro, conquered the Matterhorn, and stood atop Cho Oyu, all without the help of supplemental oxygen. But in May of 2006, Sharp embarked on what would tragically become his last expedition. Mount Everest, standing at a mind-melting 29,032 feet, is known for more than its beauty. It's also a deadly place. Above 8,000 meters lies the death zone, where oxygen is so scarce the human body literally begins to shut down. Frostbite, hallucinations, and suffocation aren't rare. They're expected. To survive up there, you need oxygen tanks, guides, teamwork, and maybe a bit of luck. Sharp had none of the above. A purist at heart, Sharp believed using oxygen was cheating. He wanted to feel the raw force of nature, to battle Everest with nothing but his lungs, his boots, and sheer grit. He even took the budget route, a $6,200 basic service package from a Nepalese agency called Asian Trekking. For reference, that's like showing up to fight a dragon in flip-flops when everyone else brought armor. On May 13, 2006, David made his final summit attempt. No guides, no radio, no backup plan, just a quiet British man pushing toward the top of the world. What happened next is shrouded in mystery. Some climbers claimed they saw him near the summit, but by May 14th he was found slumped inside Green Boots Cave, a notorious overhang named after another fallen climber whose neon boots became a landmark. Sharp was alive, barely. He'd crawled into the cave suffering from extreme frostbite, oxygen depletion, and likely hypothermia. A team of Turkish climbers passed him. Others from a commercial expedition led by Russell Bryce also saw him, but no rescue was mounted. The brutal reality? In the death zone, helping someone could mean dying yourself. One Sherpa tried. Sharp whispered, "My name is David Sharp. I'm with Asian Trekking and I just want to sleep." And with that, he did. Forever. Around 40 climbers walked past him that day. Some offered oxygen or checked his pulse, but most kept moving. The summit was calling. News of his death caused an uproar. Viral videos and interviews questioned the humanity of Everest climbers. Was it ambition? Self-preservation? Or had Everest become a trophy graveyard? Sharp's death sparked global debate about the ethics of mountaineering and whether some goals just aren't worth dying for. A year later, Sherpas respectfully moved his body off the trail. He now rests among more than 200 other souls frozen into Everest's slopes. What makes this story so heartbreaking isn't just that David died, it's that he died surrounded by people, yet utterly alone. He wasn't reckless. He wasn't unprepared. He was simply too stubborn, too devoted to purity, too human. David Sharp died doing what he loved, chasing something bigger than himself. And maybe in that silent, snow-covered cave, he reached his summit in a different way. Thea's story brings us deep into the heart of Sulawesi, Indonesia, to a pearl farm nestled in the verdant hills of Minahasa, where the air hums with tropical heat and silence wraps itself around the isolated laboratory like a shroud. But what happened behind the gates of that quiet facility was anything but peaceful. Her name was Dizzy Tuu, 44 years old, a quiet woman, respected, meticulous, and deeply devoted to her work. As the head of a research lab at the Pearl Farm, she was known for her discipline and composure. She often worked alone, early, late, never afraid of the solitude. But behind the fence, just a few meters away, was Mary. Mary wasn't another lab technician. Mary was a 14-foot saltwater crocodile, illegal, massive, and known to everyone on the property. Why it was there, how it had come to live in a pit near the lab, no one really talked about anymore. Some said it was once a pet, others that it was kept for prestige, a living monster that gave the farm an edge of mystery. But to Deasy, Mary was just part of the background. Until the morning, everything changed. It was Friday. A few workers arrived just after sunrise, expecting a normal shift. But what they found instead would haunt them for the rest of their lives. Deasy was gone. At first, they assumed she hadn't shown up, but then they noticed something near the edge of the crocodile's enclosure. A shoe, a streak of blood, and just beyond the waterline, a body, what was left of her. The reptile had torn through Deasy's abdomen, consumed one of her hands, and left her body mangled beyond recognition. Police and conservation officers were called immediately. No one could understand how it had happened. There were no cameras, no witnesses, but the signs pointed to one terrible conclusion. Deasy had fallen in. Whether she was feeding Mary or cleaning near the edge, or simply slipped, no one knows. But what is certain is that once she hit the ground inside the pit, there was no way out. The predator did what predators do. The rescue team, dozens strong, arrived days later to remove Mary from the site. It took over 3 hours, involving soldiers, conservation officers, and tranquilizers strong enough to fell an elephant. When the massive creature was finally subdued, its mouth was sealed shut with thick bands. Some believed Deasy's remains were still inside it. Mary had lived in that pit for years, illegal, unregulated, untouched. Now it would be transferred to a conservation facility, but it had already claimed a life. A scientist, a daughter, a woman who went to work that day expecting to go home. She never did. Authorities say the investigation is ongoing, but behind the headlines and cold reports, there's a deeper unease. A predator had lived among them, growing stronger in silence. A creature from another era, fed and forgotten, until it reminded everyone of what it truly was. In the end, Deasy's death wasn't just a tragedy, it was a warning. That no matter how long a monster is caged, instinct always waits, and sometimes all it takes is one step too close. It was an ordinary afternoon in 2015 in the quiet village of Liuzhuang, nestled in China's Shandong province. 6-year-old Xiao Li was outside, laughing and running around with his friends during a carefree game of hide-and-seek, the kind of childhood moment most parents take comfort in. But this playful day would take a horrifying turn that no one in the village could have anticipated. As he ran around the yard, Xiao Li spotted something on the ground, a lollipop. It was unwrapped, but looked clean, as if someone had just dropped it. To a young child, it seemed like a lucky find. Without hesitation, he picked it up, popped it in his mouth, and continued playing. What Xiao Li didn't know was that this wasn't an ordinary piece of candy. It had been deliberately coated with tetramine, a highly toxic chemical commonly used in illegal rat poison. Tetramine, sometimes called TETS, is dangerously potent. A dose as small as 7 to 10 milligrams can cause severe damage, attacking the nervous system with terrifying speed. It's been banned in many countries since the 1980s, but black market versions still circulate, especially in rural parts of China. And on that day, it found its way into the hands of an innocent child. Not long after eating the lollipop, Xiao Li collapsed behind a bush. His friends, still playing nearby, heard the thud and rushed over. What they saw was nightmare-inducing. Xiao Li was unconscious, his skin pale, and he was bleeding from his eyes, nose, mouth, and ears. Terrified, the children ran to get help. His father, Jin Sui, found Xiao Li barely clinging to life. He scooped him up and raced to Ji County Hospital. Doctors quickly realized the severity of his condition. The toxin had already started ravaging his internal organs. His blood had turned dark, and his vital signs were unstable. He was soon transferred to a larger facility, Jining Medical University Hospital, for advanced care. For 2 days, doctors fought to save him, but the poison was too strong. Xiao Li died from severe organ failure caused by the tetramine. Tests later confirmed that the lollipop had been intentionally laced with the poison. This wasn't a tragic accident. It was a calculated act. Even more chilling, authorities found additional poisoned lollipops scattered around the yard. Police determined they hadn't been thrown in. They were carefully placed, which meant someone had entered the property, walked around unnoticed, and laid a deadly trap specifically where children would find it. Detectives began digging into possible motives. Who would target a child this way? Was someone trying to get revenge on the family? Had the parents been in a dispute with anyone? Despite a thorough investigation, no one has ever been arrested. The case remains open, with more questions than answers. Zhao Li's death sparked national concern over the availability of banned substances like tetramine. How does such a dangerous chemical continue to circulate? Why is it still so accessible despite the ban? Authorities have tried to crack down on illegal sales, but the black market persists, and tragedies like this prove just how deadly that access can be. For Zhao Li's family, the pain is permanent. A father lost his son to a piece of poisoned candy. A village was left grieving, and somewhere out there, the person who did it is still unknown. This heartbreaking case is a reminder that even the smallest object, something as innocent as a lollipop, can hide unimaginable danger. And the cruelest part? Zhao Li never had a chance to know what was coming. For most people, an adventure to a remote tropical island sounds like a dream vacation. Turquoise waters, untouched beaches, and the thrill of exploring the unknown. For 26-year-old John Allen Chau, it was more than that. It was a sacred mission, an opportunity to bring the love of Jesus to a tribe untouched by the modern world. But what John didn't know, or perhaps knew all too well, was that this mission would not only be his greatest test of faith, but his final journey. It was November 2018, and John had just arrived in India's far-flung Andaman and Nicobar Islands, a stunning archipelago of 836 islands, many of them wild, mysterious, and shrouded in danger. Among them, North Sentinel Island stood apart, a forbidden zone. No hotels, no tours, no welcome signs, just a dense canopy of jungle, the sound of waves, and a people who've made it violently clear for decades they do not want visitors. The Sentinelese are believed to be descendants of the earliest humans to migrate out of Africa, untouched by modern civilization, isolated for tens of thousands of years. Their hostility to outsiders isn't just legendary, it's deadly. They've shot arrows at helicopters, killed lost fishermen, and live completely off the grid. Stepping foot on North Sentinel means risking your life, and the Indian government makes it illegal to even approach the island within 3 miles. But John Chau wasn't deterred. A devout Christian and adventure seeker from Washington State, John had dreamed of sharing the gospel with remote tribes since college. He trained for this. He took immunizations to avoid infecting the tribe. He studied linguistics. He knew the risks. In his journal, he wrote, "I don't want to die. Would it be wiser to leave and let someone else continue? No, I think I'm called to do this." On November 15th, 2018, after bribing local fishermen with $325 to get close to the island, John paddled ashore in a kayak. He came bearing gifts, a football, scissors, and fish. But instead of a welcome party, he was greeted by arrows. One, he later wrote, hit his Bible. He swam back to the boat that night, shaken but undeterred. The next morning, he tried again. What happened next was only seen from a distance. The fishermen watched in horror as islanders dragged John's body along the beach, then buried it. They returned to Port Blair and broke the news. Police soon arrested 7 people for helping John reach the island. Meanwhile, Indian authorities debated whether to retrieve his body, knowing full well that approaching the Sentinelese could trigger more violence or expose them to modern diseases. Aerial surveillance later confirmed what the fishermen saw, a grave on the sand. The incident exploded across global media. Videos, think pieces, and fiery tweets debated whether John was a martyr or a misguided intruder. "This is not missionary work, it's suicide," said one critic. Others saw bravery in his faith. But make no mistake, North Sentinel Island is one of the most dangerous places on Earth, not because of venomous snakes or volcanoes, but because it is humanity untouched and fiercely protected. Survival there isn't about gear or guts. It's about knowing when to stay away. John's family grieved, but forgave his killers. In a public statement, they called him a beloved son, brother, uncle, and best friend. His church saw him as someone who died doing what he believed in, despite the cost. He wasn't reckless in preparation, he was reckless in conviction. And maybe that's the tragedy, not just that John Chau died, but that in his final act of devotion, he met people who didn't need saving, and never asked to be found. The next story brings us to Samut Prakan, just outside the restless pulse of Bangkok, to a place not known for tragedy, but for spectacle. The Samut Prakan Crocodile Farm is the largest of its kind in Thailand. a surreal place where ancient predators perform for wide-eyed tourists, surrounded by fences and moats and the illusion of safety. But one Sunday afternoon, amid the sound of tour guides and clicking cameras, the line between show and horror was shattered. She arrived early. Her name was Somjai Sethbunwas, a 40-year-old woman, dressed plainly and moving quietly through the crowds. To most, she appeared like any other visitor, curious, maybe tired, but there was something different about her eyes. They didn't look around with wonder. They were searching for an exit. The pit was massive. Below it, dozens, maybe hundreds, of crocodiles lay piled in the sun, their prehistoric bodies unmoving, their eyes half-lidded in eternal suspicion. Tourists leaned over the barriers to take photos, unaware that someone nearby was about to turn the attraction into a stage for death. Without a word, Somjai climbed the safety railing. There was shouting, confusion. Some thought it was a prank, maybe part of the show, but no staff moved fast enough. She leapt. Time slowed. She hit the water with a splash that echoed across the enclosure. The crocodiles stirred, sluggish and uninterested at first, until something primal flickered in their cold blood. At first, nothing happened. She surfaced, alive, and began to swim directly toward them. Some screamed for her to turn back. Others were frozen. In that moment, it became clear. She wasn't there to be rescued. She had come to die. One crocodile snapped, then another. At least two closed their jaws around her body, dragging her down in a thrashing spiral of blood and foam. Tourists turned away, some weeping, others filming, unable to process what they had just seen. Somjai was gone. Later that day, her family revealed the truth. She had planned this. 2 suicide notes had been left behind, and weeks earlier she had made a chilling comment to her husband. "I'll have crocodiles bite me to death." He hadn't believed her. Neither had her mother. She used to talk about jumping into the crocodile pond. I joked she'd need her ID card with her because there'd be nothing left to recognize. The words, once brushed off, now hung heavy with guilt. The autopsy confirmed what everyone feared. She died from massive trauma. Skull fractures, brain injury, likely from the first powerful strike. The Samut Prakan Crocodile Farm quickly released a statement insisting they had strict safety protocols and that no barrier could stop someone truly determined to die. This was only the second suicide in the farm's decades-long history, but the damage was done. By Monday, thousands of people flooded the park, not for the animals, but to stare at the place where Somjai had entered the water, where life and death collided in the most brutal way imaginable. The crocodile pit had become a shrine, a morbid monument to despair, and through all of it her family mourned not just the loss, but the silence that came before it, the missed signs, the jokes made to deflect pain. The helplessness of watching someone suffer behind a smile until it's too late. This wasn't nature claiming a life. This was grief, masked as spectacle. It ended in the jaws of monsters, but it began much earlier, in isolation and unspoken anguish. Sometimes the most dangerous predators aren't in the water. They're the ones inside us. It was a quiet Saturday evening in 2017 in Jesenik, a small town tucked away in the northeastern Czech Republic. A 65-year-old mother and her 45-year-old daughter were enjoying what was meant to be a peaceful visit to a friend's garden home. The highlight of their evening? A relaxing session in the private sauna, something so ordinary it didn't seem to carry any risk at all. For a while, everything seemed fine. The women had been inside the sauna for some time, unwinding in the warmth. But as more minutes passed, their friend, who owned the home, started to feel uneasy. Something wasn't right. The women had been inside far longer than usual. Concerned, she finally decided to check on them. What she found was horrifying. Both women were lying motionless on the sauna floor. The heat was suffocating, and it quickly became clear that something had gone terribly wrong. The sauna door's handle had broken, trapping them inside with no way out. They had tried desperately to escape. Evidence of their struggle was all around. The small glass window in the sauna door had been shattered from the inside, and broken glass lay scattered on the ground. Towels were tossed across the floor, a heartbreaking sign of their panicked effort to survive. Emergency services were called immediately, but it was already too late. When police and paramedics arrived, they confirmed the worst. Both the mother and daughter had died from heat stroke, their bodies overwhelmed by the rising temperature and the inability to escape. It was a scene that left responders shaken. 2 lives lost in what should have been a harmless moment of relaxation. Photos taken by the authorities painted a clear and chilling picture. One image showed the broken door handle, the very thing that sealed their fate. Another captured the cracked glass from their attempted escape. These details, small on their own, told a gut-wrenching story when put together. According to police spokesperson Eva Kormosova, the women had likely been trapped for around 90 minutes before they were discovered. That delay proved fatal. As the investigation unfolded, questions began to surface. Was the sauna equipment properly maintained? Had the door handle shown signs of wear? Could the tragedy have been prevented with regular safety checks? These weren't just technical questions. They were the key to understanding how such an unimaginable accident had occurred. The case sparked wider concern about private saunas and their safety standards. While public facilities often follow strict codes, personal setups don't always face the same level of scrutiny. The town of Jesenik was left in shock. Neighbors and friends mourned the sudden, senseless loss of two women who simply wanted a quiet evening together. The sauna, once seen as a source of peace and comfort, had turned into a death trap. The broken hardware, the shattered window, and the untouched towels were now haunting symbols of what went wrong. This tragic story is a reminder of how fragile safety can be. One faulty piece of equipment, one moment of delay, can turn something familiar into something fatal. It's a painful lesson in just how quickly a calm evening can spiral into catastrophe. It was supposed to be a perfect summer day. Blue skies, family barbecue, laughter echoing by the water. For Aaron Page, an energetic 8-year-old daredevil from Pontefract, West Yorkshire, it was his birthday. The kind of day you dream about as a kid. June 5th, 2021, one of the hottest days of the year. Seemed like the perfect time for Aaron and his family to swap their backyard barbecue plans for a spontaneous trip to Bolton Abbey, a popular beauty spot nestled in North Yorkshire's rolling hills. But what none of them knew was that the river wharf, sparkling in the sun, was hiding a dark and deadly secret. At first glance, Bolton Abbey looks like something out of a fairy tale. Stone bridges, wooded trails, families skipping stones. But the river that flows through it is anything but gentle. The river wharf, especially near a notorious section called the Strid, is one of the most deceptive and dangerous bodies of water in the UK. It narrows sharply, forcing gallons of water through tight rocky crevices, creating powerful undercurrents that can suck even the strongest swimmer under. It's been said that no one who's fallen in there has ever made it out alive. To survive this place, you need more than just swimming skills. You need knowledge of the river's hidden perils, proper safety gear, and frankly, a good deal of luck. Aaron, the youngest of 5 and known by his family as a bit of a wild spirit, had his eyes on the teens jumping from a tree into the water upstream. "I'm doing that," he declared with birthday boy confidence. His dad, Alan, quickly shut it down. "No, you're not," he warned, and they meant it. No one had planned to go swimming, but tragedy doesn't always wait for a plan. As the family set up their barbecue just past 2 p.m., Aaron's dad asked his older brother Joshua to walk him to the toilet, just 200 yards from the picnic spot. The boys wandered onto a cobbled beach near the riverbank, standing ankle-deep on slick rocks. In a heartbreaking moment that Joshua later recounted at the inquest, Aaron slipped. "I tried to pull him out," Joshua said, "but I slipped. I let go." Panic erupted. Joshua's screams were heard by nearby paddlers. Andrea Campbell, a day tripper, dove in without hesitation. "I could just see his head under the water," she cried at the inquest, but the current was too strong. One moment Aaron was there, then he was gone. A full-scale rescue effort began. Police divers, the Yorkshire Air Ambulance, 28 volunteer rescuers, and frantic members of the public scoured the river. For 3 excruciating hours, Aaron's family waited. At 6:25 p.m., the worst was confirmed. His body was found downstream, lifeless. He had drowned. Videos and tributes soon flooded social media, turning Aaron into a symbol of just how unforgiving nature can be. The tragedy sparked renewed calls for better signage and safety measures around the river wharf, especially near Bolton Abbey and the Strid. The most tragic part? Aaron didn't do anything reckless. He didn't dive from a tree. He wasn't even swimming. He simply slipped on his birthday. But Aaron Page died surrounded by family who adored him, and his brother did everything he could. He died on a day filled with love, laughter, and sunshine, and that's how he'll be remembered.